Welcome to the East Ward Update. I'm Durwell Montgomery, Council Member for the East Ward. I'm joined today by Rence Callahan, architect with Walter Robbs Callahan & Pierce, to talk about Union Station. Good to have you here, Rence. Won't you first just introduce you, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, Councilman. My name is Rence Callahan. I'm an architect with one of the partners with Walter Robbs Callahan & Pierce. We're about ready to celebrate our 50th anniversary as a firm here in Winston-Salem. We're located on Trade Street, just north of the Millennium Center. I've been with the firm almost 40 years, so not quite the entire 50 years, and we have produced numerous projects around town, from the BB&T Financial Center to the Transportation Center to the more recently Deacon Tower out at Wake Forest. So we've got a pretty good track record in terms of projects. We are now the largest architectural firm in the Piedmont Triad, so I think that's a good indication of our firm and our firm's capacity. A few years ago, we were selected by the state AIA as the Firm of the Year in North Carolina, so we're very proud of that recognition too. So that's a pretty good overview of the firm. I've been involved in the community for the 4 decades I've lived here in Winston, from being on the West End Association Board to the Winston-Salem Foundation Board and many organizations in between.
Yeah. So as we look at the Union Station project itself, it's been a long road trotting towards where we are now. And so tell us a little bit about our process in terms of some of the groundwork that has shaped us to get to the place where we are now, particularly from your firm's participation in the process of developing where we are now.
So I think that as it is with every project, and we were very pleased to be selected, the first step is the existing condition analysis, just becoming familiar with the building itself. A lot of people don't know much about Union Station, as you can see. It was built in 1926. It was designed by a New York architectural firm, William Friedheimer. I hope I got the pronunciation right. He, prior to starting his own firm, was a design architect in another firm, the firm that designed Grand Central Terminal. So he became familiar with railroad station design, and in 1916, he opened his own office up with another partner, and they were commissioned by the Southern Railroad to do a fairly large train station in Macon, Georgia. And it was very successful, and from that, multiple different other projects came along, and then in 1926, the firm was hired to do both the Winston Station and the Greensboro Station. So the design of this building is it's a 3-story building. The top floor is actually the terminal waiting space, so you would come in from the top floor and then go down elevators and stairs to get to the train platform. The top floor was mainly, as I said, lobbies and ticket booths. The second floor, the middle floor, was for Southern Railroad offices, and then the lower floor was for freight and general service facilities down on the lower floor, mechanical and electrical, those kinds of things. So we did a pretty exhaustive analysis and found that Mr. Davis, who owned the garage, it was Davis Garage for a number of years, was actually did a wonderful job of not destroying the inside of the building. You know, imagine a truck repair garage could have been pretty misused in terms of the way they used it, but he was very careful not to destroy much of the historic fabric. So we've got a wonderful building that is very solid, that can be now restored. That existing condition analysis allowed us to kind of set the platform, get a good understanding of the building, what its capabilities were, and what the opportunities were from a restoration perspective. We also knew that this project had real potential added value. Mm-hmm. We knew from the master plan studies that the Simon G. Atkins CDC had done prior to us being retained that this corridor north of Winston-Salem State University, coming up Martin Luther King, had the capacity to really create kind of an edge to the university. And so thinking about how the building and understanding what some of the objectives for not only the building but the adjacent property was a good also foundation for us to understand how this might move forward. So the key steps were then to, and certainly you were part of trying to organize, get the community to give some input.
Right.
And that input was really critical in terms of setting up a couple community meetings to allow the community to come in. What we were very confident was going to happen was exactly what happened, and that was there was consistency from what has been presented over the years through that master plan by Simon Giac and CDC, and what the community said when they came out.
All right, and as a part of that, community discussion, we heard, and you all heard as well, some great thoughts from individuals who said some things that have been heard and reiterated over the years. One thing I think that's very important as we looked at this project and looked at the process is the fact that there has been over the years that consistent voice from community and from community leaders, from individuals that live in the neighborhood, people who may have grown up in the community in the past and may live in other parts of the community today, to hear some of the stories of them telling stories of remembering riding the train into Union Station, or remembering when individuals rode into the station. You hear all those stories from individuals as well, and so that's from an architectural standpoint. You have that history from the building, but then you also have the stories that go along with people's experiences being in that same facility, which I think is also a grand thing for us also to remember in the process as well.
Well, I think that just goes then to the point of, as we move forward with the design, that main lobby on the upper floor can be not only a lobby for ticketing for mass transit use, buses, park transit, and maybe someday in the not too distant future, actually Amtrak trains can come through. But the lobby is such a grand space that it can also be a museum to celebrate the history of transportation in this community, and going back to multiple things, not only the trains coming through that station, but Safe Bus Company, Piedmont Airlines, the whole kind of expansive thoughts that we have relative to how transportation was an integral part of framing how this community has grown.
And as we are approaching this moment, is just some reflecting back in terms of the time frame that the city has been in discussion on doing this project here. It's been some years, and we know that things sometimes move slower than we like, and sometimes other things move much swifter than originally planned. But in this process, it's been a long time coming in getting to this place. Just recently here, with over the last 2.5 years, the city came into ownership of the property in preparation of being able to transform it into that multimodal transportation center there. And so now, as we're in this place and you all come on as a role of looking at how we can actually utilize the space and going out to the public, hearing what the public has to say, you all went back and began the process of really drilling down into the information that you all saw, looking at the community, looking at what opportunities, what was feasible and what was not feasible, and been able to develop some new thoughts within that process. And so in looking at that and our uses in the future, I believe that we have a grand opportunity there to make some exciting things happen, both from a public-private partnership perspective, because I think something like this is going to take us as a city and as a community coming together to really make the impact that's necessary to do it. So right now we're going to take a little break, and when we return, we're going to talk about the two options that City Council will consider this winter.
Even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up
and live out the true meaning of its creed.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
And this will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning.
My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty.
Of thee I sing.
Land where my fathers died.
Land of the pilgrim's pride.
From every mountainside,
let freedom ring.
And when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet,
from every state and every city,
we will be able to speed up that day
when all of God's children,
Black men and white men,
Jews and Gentiles,
Protestants and Catholics,
will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual,
free at last.
Free at last.
Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Welcome back to the East Ward Update, and we continue our conversation with Rich Callahan as we talk about this Union Station project. And again, we know that there's been some great time and effort put in by you and your firm, as well as city staff and the community, to get to where we are now. We talked about some of the opportunities for community to be engaged, and then what happened after you got that community input and you went back and put your heads together.
So I think we got the community input. We heard wonderful ideas, very consistent ideas in terms of what the community objectives were. And the community is not only that East Winston area just to the north of Union Station, but it's also the community of Winston-Salem State. So really pulling together those two communities and the ideas. We also looked at not only the building, but the site. And one of the things we saw as we looked at the site was that the existing building and the uses that could go in the building as it relates to available off-street parking, that there would be an excess of parking. So we began to think about not only just a basic restoration and how it might be used, but we started to talk to city staff about what uses might be able to go in. And it became pretty clear that as of right now, the City Department of Transportation could not fill up the entire building. So that in itself began to let us think a little bit out of the box in terms of what other uses that were consistent with the wishes that we were hearing from the community. So we took all of that and synthesized that into 4 different options. One option that was basically the option of filling the building up with city offices, all the way to a much more entrepreneurial scheme where we looked at pretty significant development within the site, leveraging that available off-street parking. We took that, developed 4 schemes, and then we narrowed it down to 2 schemes that we further refined. And those are option A and B. And so option A is one where you can see the existing station and how that capacity of parking, about a little over 150 spaces, could be developed on the adjacent property to the west of the site. So as we looked at that, we looked at not only that available parking and the fact that we would have about 60 additional spaces that wouldn't be required, but then we looked at the building itself. So the top floor, and I think that'll show up, we began to look at how we might create a wonderful transportation lobby in that historic lobby, and that's the area to the west at the top floor. And that would be where we would restore that impeccably to the way it originally was. But because this isn't really going to replace the transportation center downtown, there's not really a functional need for a large transportation facility. So it left the area to the east of that main lobby available for future use. So we've identified that could be retail or restaurant use. And we would suggest, as part of the way the project moves forward, that would be the kind of use that would be something that has been asked for both by the community, the East Winston community, but also with the university. The idea to have that kind of more available restaurant within walking distance of the campus. We've also identified, and we heard the community say they want a community resource center, and having that right in the corner adjacent to Martin Luther King so that it would be within walking distance of East Winston was part of the way we addressed the top floor. The middle floor, the second floor, then could be transportation offices for DOT and other somewhat related offices, city offices. And then the lower floor could be additional transportation. These could be more of the maintenance type offices at the lower floor. So that was option A. Option B, I think there's option B. Option B was then getting a little bit out of the box and saying, if we had that available capacity, overcapacity of off-street parking, could we also leverage the site to provide additional connections so that as development takes place on Martin Luther King and moves north, we would infill the area just to the north west of Union Station with a possible new construction. Not to do that now, but to at least preserve that site for future additional development. And then create kind of a park environment between the two buildings. And this is the way, as I said before, leveraging that off-street parking to really make that an available opportunity. So again, the top floor would be very similar, except we did hear that the community wanted that community resource center to really be something special. So we've enlarged the size of that space and made it like 3 or 4 times the size of what we had shown in option B. And then we suggested that because of the additional development that might take place north of the building, northwest of the building, that we could have even a larger restaurant potentially in that eastern sector. And then on level 2, we would also then look to get the maximum amount of non-city use within the building, preserving the Department of Transportation and transportation uses to over half of the building use, and then on the middle floor, opening that up for potentially other uses, maybe Winston-Salem State offices or even some other nonprofit type offices from the community on the east side. And then level 1 would again be where we'd then shift to real transportation offices down on that lower level. But we continue to preserve for future rail service, a rail platform that would be serviced by vertical circulation, the elevators and stairs you see just to the left of that. So I think that as a study began to show us how this building and this restoration renovation project can really bring true added value to the broader community over in East Winston and along the corridor of Martin Luther King, and provide true added value for Winston-Salem State. So I think while it's taken a little longer to work through these processes, we could have moved very quickly if it was just a restoration design project itself. But stepping back, getting that community input, hearing what the community wanted, I think at the end of the day, this is truly going to be a real success for the community.
So as we look at these 2 options that you all have prepared, narrowing down from the 4 that you originally looked at, and then now at these 2 options, what would you say are the 2, between the 2 are the largest differences between option A and option B?
Well, option A is the one that just fills up the site with parking. So that, and it's not necessary. We've got over 150 spaces, and if you were building that building and filling it up with the uses we've shown, you may only need 70 spaces, so 70 or 80 spaces. And obviously a restaurant, because of the way that it's laid out, is driven by seats, so we have some latitude in terms of exactly what that would be. So I think option A is the safer way to go. Option B is the more entrepreneurial way to go, but I think it's the one that suggests that leveraging that interest, and that's what we heard from Winston-Salem State in the community, is something that may not happen immediately, but it allows that to happen and kind of grow on the overall master plan. So I think that's one, but I think there are 2 parts to that one answer.
Yeah, and I think it goes into what you mentioned before in reference to the SG Atkins CDC's master plan study that they did of the corridor, which, as you stated, it identified Union Station as what is described in that plan as a catalytic project.
Yes.
And so having a more entrepreneurial development done there will have, in my opinion, based upon what you look at in that master plan, and those who developed it would have that larger and broader impact, not just on that site. Because I think that's one thing to think of as well, is that this investment of $18 million into a particular site, yes, it has an impact on that physical building, but what are the additional impacts that overflow to the surrounding community? And I think this is an opportunity for the community, both public and private, to come together and have an impact, one on the site there at Union Station, but I think the potential for overflowing into that surrounding community is a grand opportunity.
I think we are very fortunate. It seems that the stars have aligned, in that the project is moving forward. It's been there for a while. All the processes that have gone through for the city to acquire it have placed it in a position to move forward. And the fact that the City Department of Transportation doesn't need the entire building, and the city, it just kind of allows for this grander idea to move forward. as I said, it could have been easy just to restore the building and fill it up with offices, but that really wouldn't have done the community a service in terms of what it's, in being responsive to the Brailsford and Dunleavy master plan that was done for the Community Development Corporation.
So now with these two items, these two options that are here, you all will be making a presentation to the Public Works Committee this month. And the Public Works Committee will hear these two options and won't make a decision on a recommendation at that time on particular options, but you all will be making that presentation here very soon, correct?
Yes, that's the next step. We had our last community meeting just before Christmas, and we're in the position of finishing up the study so we can go ahead and make the formal submission of the study and our thoughts as it relates to how the project should move forward.
And so after committee looks at and examines these particular options and then gets to the place of accepting or submitting a recommendation from a committee and council perspective, there's also the next phase of this project in development where council will have to select again in terms of putting out the actual architectural and engineering for the particular option that is done, because this was just the study in terms of looking at the space piece. This doesn't have all of the architectural designs and the engineering pieces that are associated with it. And I think that's something for people to be clear on as well, because I think some folk thought that after this we'd have all the plans done, this will be it, but we have to continue some things to work on with that. So you have to have the architectural work done, the engineering pieces to move along with the vision that's been created based on these two options, right?
That's right.
And then from there, as we continue to move through that process, probably later on this year, we'll be able to get in a position to see what those documents look like, and then begin to move within the next steps of development.
That's exactly. I mean, what you've seen in terms of different options are diagrams. It's a feasibility study, but to take that feasibility study and you know, the fact that it is an existing building would allow it to move forward fairly quickly, but you have to go through the normal design processes, schematic design, design development, then the construction documents, which are the drawings that show a contractor how to do the restoration. And the fact that it is a restoration, there's a lot of very specific things that have to be incorporated into final design documents, and then put it out for bid and go through that process. And so hopefully later on this fall, into the fall, the schedule would allow for maybe real construction to take place. And I know that's what you're waiting for.
Well, and yes, and when I think about my time on council and being engaged in this project, when I got elected back in 2009, this is one of the very first things that was continued consistently high on my list of things. And this is 6 years later, being in this place now. It's exciting to be in this place, knowing that even prior to the 6 years of my engagement within the process, that there was tons of work done prior to that and people's engagement within the project. But to arrive at this moment, I think community is getting even more excited to see that something is moving from this thought, this idea, to something that is actually going to be tangible and that they can see happening in front of their eyes. So I'm excited that the city's been able to move this far, that you all have been able to be a part of this process, and I think the community at large has yet to see the grandeur of what's going to take place here on this site, and I think it's going to be transformational, not just for this site, but for the entire community located there.
Well, I think it does take a little bit of time, but in the 6 years, you've done a great job in getting it to this platform. Now, in the next 6 years, are you going to be able to get Amtrak to bring a train through?
We're going to work on that part. We're going to work on that part. But again, I just want to say thank you for your hard work on this project, and I want to thank all who helped pull these pieces together because I think we've arrived at this point not just because of city staff, not just because of myself, but because of collective effort within community to get to where we are right now.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Again, want to thank Rents Callahan for joining me today. You can learn more about Union Station on the city's website at www.cityofws.org. You can see the show in its entirety on the city's YouTube channel, cityofwinstonsalem.gov. Thank you for watching.